Hello! So today I've got a Kano replay analysis for you guys, and let's get into it. So I'm playing against someone I just matched with on the official Flesh and Blood Discord, and I've blanked out their name here because, my opponent hasn't asked for all the big-brained YouTube comments to completely shred apart their plays. So I just want to keep them anonymous. The point of this analysis is to analyze my plays. So I won the die roll there, and I believe whoever wins the die roll in this matchup wants to go first. Because this matchup is just entirely a race, right? Both players are just trying to burn each other down. Rhinar wants to take advantage of Kano's low life pool and intimidate cards out of Kano's hands so Kano can't block and just deal the 30. And Kano wants to take advantage of Rhinar's low arcane barrier and just burn Rhinar down. So looking at my opening hand, I know that I want to use my action point to play this energy potion. So with the remaining resources I have, I choose to Kano off the top. Unfortunately, only finding a blue zap, which is kind of like the lowest damage spell I could have found. But, that's how it is with Kano sometimes. So play this blue zap, it just comes in for 2, and I still get to play my energy potion and arsenal the chain lightning. So I could have, of course, used my action point to play the chain lightning, but then that chain lightning it's coming in for 3 damage and I don't get to play my energy potion. And I personally think the ceiling for chain lightning is way higher than just 3 damage. If I need the chain lightning to come in for 3 damage at some point in the future, that can be done easily enough. Just chain lightning and then snap back on top of it, and chain lightning's coming for 3. But the ceiling is really high, right? If you chain lightning into a blazing ether, then your chain lightning has come in for 6 damage. Or if your chain lightning, lets you play another red spell from your hand that you just have floating resources for anyway, then a chain lightning has helped you deal way more than 3 damage. So I personally like to keep the chain lightning, and I also get to play my energy potion. And now I've drawn an all blue hand, which means I could like Kano off the top a bunch, but I found that I personally don't like to Kano blindly off the top when there's enough opting sources in Kano, right? There's Ether Spindle, there's the Lens, there's Gaze the Ages. So looking at this hand, I already decided if my opponent gives me the chance, I'd like to use some of these cards to block, and then just play a blue spell from my hand, instead of trying to blindly Kano off the top. So Rhinar's intimidating me twice here, standard Rhinar stuff. And then coming in with this axe. So depending on what they draw and discard, the axe will come in for more damage. So they're rolling to see what they discard. And ooh, they discarded Blood Rush Bellow. That is really good for us. But again, that's also how it is with Rhinar sometimes, right? Sometimes you discard like good cards. So this axe is coming in for 6 if I don't defend, or if I only defend with 1 card. If I defend with 2 cards, it comes in for 3. And I see a blue Voltic Bolt that I know I'm going to get back into my hand at the end of my opponent's turn. And I think my best line of play is just to block out the 6 damage and then come in Voltic Bolt for 4, instead of trying to use these 4 blues to randomly Kano off the top. Because, I mean, the same thing could happen that happened on turn 1, right? I could just find some blues off the top that don't deal a lot of damage. Or worst case, I find, like, I whiff, right? I find like an Eye of Ophidia or a Nourishing Emptiness, which I cannot play off the top. And then I've taken that 6 damage for nothing. So, yeah, I just Voltic Bolt for 4 here. My opponent has no Arcane Barrier. Their Skullcap is turned off right now. So, yeah, they have to take this, so not entirely sure what they're thinking about here. Maybe they're just trying to decide what they're doing on the next turn. Yep, they take the 4 and I pass it back. Yes, okay, so I remember this turn. So this E-Strike is coming in for 5, and for 5 go again. And as I'm against Rhinar, I'm fully expecting some Intimidate to happen after this E-Strike. So while I have all my cards in my hand and I can decide what I want to block with, I decide that, I want to block this and then just let the Intimidate go through to minimize the damage I take. But I get punished because my opponent doesn't intimidate me, instead they come in with a command and conquer. So now I need to decide whether the Chain Lightning is worth defending. And I believe I decide not to defend this because I think a Sonic Boom is, well, is much more threatening than having a Chain Lightning in Arsenal. Of course, it sucks to lose Arsenal, but if I were to block this out, I just don't have a next turn. And given that this matchup is very much a race, I think that is not a great play. So I just take the 6 here, lose my Chain Lightning, and next I can come out with a Sonic Boom. I missed my Tunic trigger here, which is, not great. I mean, I had the resources to play what I wanted to this turn, but, going into my opponent's turn, I don't have the Tunic. And since Kano plays at instant speed, the Tunic could actually be very relevant, so... blunder by me there. So Sonic Boom coming in for 4, and my opponent doesn't have Arcane Barrier, so again, not sure what they're thinking about. Cool. So they say no blocks, and I have a red snapback, which is really good for us. That's 7 damage off a 2-card hand. Yeah, at this point, I'm just pointing out to my opponent that they haven't recorded the damage from the Sonic Boom. Just pointing that out so they could take it before I do my next thing. Yep. Take the 4 and then snap back for 3. Cool. So I draw up, and looking at this hand, I decide right now that ideally I don't want to block at all with this hand, because with just 1 blue I can reverberate and then eat the spindle off that reverberate, put something good on top, and use my last blue to play that thing off the top, using my energy potion if I need to. So these intimidates my opponent does. I'm quite, like, I don't really care about it because I don't want to block anyway. Because I feel like I have a very strong turn next turn. So, okay, so then they come in with a Blood Rush Bellow. So they are also having a very strong turn. And I'm going to pause right here because this right here is simultaneously the worst and best thing about playing against Rhinar as Kano, in my experience, is that usually in their biggest turns, like right now this Blood Rush Barrel, there is a point where they have no cards in hand. Like I have an opportunity window here to respond while they have no cards before they draw the cards from their Blood Rush Bellow. And so if they were at a lower life total, this is very risky for them, because if I just pop off, there is no way for them to defend it. And I have full information about, about everything. So that is, that's a really good thing when you're facing Rhinar as Kano. Of course, on the flip side is that if they had a decent life total where you cannot pop off and kill them, then, they potentially get a really good Blood Rush Bellow turn. So there's that. So they banish another random card from my hand. They draw up. And I'm just leaving my cards out there in case they intimidate me further, because, it's Rhinar. Yep, so they do intimidate me again. And this is looking kind of scary. This lets a lot of buffs they've got going on. But it ends off with just an axe hit. So, and the axe misses. So this axe is just coming in for 10, which, I say just for 10, it's a third of Kano's life. But as far as Blood Rush Bellow turns go, it's not the strongest. And I'm, like I said, I have a strong turn next turn with this red Ether Spindle and red Reverberate. So I'm just gonna take this 10. This time I remember my Tunic trigger. And that does become relevant in this turn. because then with one blue, I can Reverberate, Ether Spindle, and Crucible. And, oh yeah, so I make a bit of a blunder on this turn as well, where I use the Crucible on the Reverberate instead of using the Crucible on the Ether Spindle. And damage-wise, you know, both plays are the same, but Crucible on the Ether Spindle gives me one extra opt. Like, I would have opted 5 instead of only opting 4 if I sequence my Crucible correctly. So yeah, there you go. You see me do the Crucible and then come in the Reverberate for 4, which I should have just Reverberated for 3, because like I've said, I have full information about my opponent's Arcane Barrier. So I have full information of how much damage my cards are going to do, because my opponent has no Arcane Barrier. So I know I can definitely Ether Spindle off this Reverberate. So should have saved the Crucible for that. So here I banished the Ether Spindle off the Reverberate hit, used the Tunic and the one floating to Ether Spindle for 4. And yep, my opponent takes this, which allows me to opt 4. So, right, so opting 4 is such a blessing with Kano. So right now, I'm going to pause again to talk about what I want to see in these 4 cards. So I still have a blue in hand and my energy potion on the field, which means that I can play any card in my deck off the top, because the blue in my hand pays for the banish from Kano and the energy potion pays for the cost if it needs to. So there's so many potential combos I could do. The simplest one being just Blazing Ether off the top, and you know, I've already dealt 8 damage, so that Blazing Ether comes in for 8 immediately. And since I'm opting 4, there's actually so much more I could do. Maybe I could find a Sonic Boom on the top, put a red below that Sonic Boom, play off the Sonic Boom, and after get a red that's under the Sonic Boom as well. Or if I find a Tomb of Ether Wind on top, I could banish a blue from my hand, play the tomb, draw 2 more blues, continue Kanoing off the top. And if all else fails, suppose I just see like 4 blues off the top. If one of them is a Gaze the Ages, I could just send 3 blues to the bottom of my deck, pitch the blue in my hand to play the Gaze, which will come back into my hand and lets me opt a further 2 to just continue digging for either that Sonic Boom or the Blazing Ether. So there's a lot of things, a lot of potential things I could do with this opt 4. And honestly, some of these, like the Tomb of Etherwind in particular, is where opting 5 versus opting 4 actually does make a difference. So let's see what I hit here. So I hit a Blazing Ether, so I know immediately, alright, so I'm just putting that on the top, and that's going to come in for another 8 this turn. And then, now I'm thinking about the 4 cards I want to draw on the next turn. So, right, so again, so with the Blazing Ether coming in for 8 here, I know my opponent's going to be at 11, which means their next turn is probably their last turn. Ideally, I just want to go off on their turn to deal the final 11 damage, which shouldn't be difficult. And the ideal configuration I want in my hand for that is a good number of blues to Kano off the top, and perhaps one damaging card, like either a red or one of my good yellows, like Sonic Boom or Lesson in Lava. So with that, I believe I decide, so I send the Tomb of Findle down to the bottom, of course, because that's too slow, given that it's only going to be one more turn probably in this game. And I believe I also elect to send the Scalding Rain. I want to make sure I have this blue Voltic Bolt, and I sort of trust that I think I'll draw another red or yellow. So I just put a Scalding Rain to the bottom, and even if I don't, if I have 4 blues in hand, 4 blues and Energy Potion while I still have lands up is still, you know, good enough. It's better than having a blue and 3 reds, for example. So that's why I sent the Scalding Rain to the bottom. And yep, so this is just coming back to what we were trying to do this turn, which is the Blazing Ether for 8. Yep. Opponent has to take that, and then let's see what they come back at us with. So at the moment they start discarding cards, it's when I want to go off, and I draw up, and here's where I'm so glad about the way I opted, because I've got 3 blues and a yellow, and my yellow Lesson Lava. So I have lethal in hand already. It's just about when I want to go off. So definitely sending that Scalding Rain and the Tomb of Fendel paid off for us here. Like sending them to the bottom paid off for us, yeah. So now they discard a 6 attack, so the Intimidate is coming in, and I'm going to respond before the Intimidate happens. So at this point, knowing that I have lethal in hand, I need to think about what potential cards my opponent can have that could stop me. So because at this point the Skullcap is turned on, right? They're at 3 life lower than me. So if they have, a couple of blues in hand, they could stop my Lesser and Lava combo. So then I just start to take a look at what they've played and pitched so far, and I realized they pitched a yellow, which means it's unlikely that they had a blue in hand when they started this turn. Or rather, sorry, they pitched a yellow to play a blue from their hand. So it's unlikely that they have another blue. They may have drawn into it, because what they played allowed them to draw a card. But right now I'm guessing they only have one blue in hand. And with just one blue in hand, they can't really stop the damage I'm about to do. And if they use that blue plus the other 2 cards in their hand to stop 6 Arcane Bearer off their Skullcap, then they don't have a turn at all. So I'm thinking it's safe to just go off here. And I do. Taking a while to think about it just because, yeah, so here's where I'm noticing that they pitched a yellow and played a blue. Just making sure I did my math right. So start with the Storm Striders, pitching the Eye of Ophidia. The opt doesn't really matter because with the Lesson and Lava, I'm going to shuffle my deck anyway. But starting with Eye of Ophidia is definitely the best. And actually, in this case, it did sort of pay off because I found a Tomb of Aetherwind on top and a blue, and I could set it up so there's a blue immediately after it, which means pitching a blue from my hand to play this Tomb of Aetherwind is completely free because I immediately get the blue back. So at this point, note that the Storm Striders are still in the stack because the opt from the Eye of Ophidia happens first because I pitched it to play the Storm Striders, and then I Kano while the Storm Striders are still in the stack. So I get to Tomb, and I know I'm drawing 1 at least to get the blue back. And I'm deciding whether I draw a second one or I just increase the damage of the next card I play by 1. And here's where I make a mistake. I decide to increase the damage of my next card by 1, but thinking about it further, drawing the extra card effectively does the same thing, because even if the card is a red, that's an extra Metacarpus node activation, which increases the attack by 1. So even in the worst case, drawing the extra card gives me the same effect. But in the best case, if I draw a blue or yellow, I get multiple Metacarpus node activations. So another blunder by me there. Draw 1, increase next damage by 1. And then the Storm Striders resolve. I can play my next attack, my next non-attack, as an instant. So I use my 1 floating resource to play this Lesson in Lava, and I will pitch to Metacarpus noted. So this is coming in for 5. It's buffed by the Tomb of Aetherwind and the Metacarpus node. And my opponent decides not to block, so that tells me, they either don't have any blues in hand, they probably don't have any blues, or they would need to use 2 or potentially even all 3 of the cards to block this damage. So at this point, they're basically dead. Just going through the full combo here, I dig up a Lesson in Lava, and then I pitch to Kano to banish a Lesson in Lava. And I'm still floating the 2 from earlier, so I can also increase the damage of the Lesson in Lava by 1 with the Crucible. So this Lesson in Lava is coming in for 4. I think my opponent's checking whether I did my resource count correctly. And I did, and that's where the energy potion that we played all the way in turn 1 really came in handy. Right, it allows me to buff these, and Each instance I increase his damage by actually increases my total damage output this turn by 2, because that also increases Blazing Ether. So yeah, then this is the final piece of the combo, just pitching the last blue to Blazing Ether for 9. And that's GG. At this point there's nothing, even if my opponent has 3 blues in hand, they can't stop this. So there we go, we call it there. So a few mistakes by me in this game for sure, but overall I'd say the game went pretty smoothly. My opponent's strong turns didn't end up being very strong. And yeah, so that was it. So thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed it.